This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Tzadi Ches. We're holding in the bottom of Sadi Zayin Omid Beis, approximately 12 lines from the bottom. The first word in line is Al Atzman. Tanu Rabbanan, this is really in the middle of a discussion that we just were having. What is the matbeya of Yerushalayim? Says the Gemara, David Ushloimai Mitzad Echa, the Jerusalem coin, says the Gemara, has David HaMelech and Shloimeh on one side, Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh Mitzad Acher. Vezi matbeya shel Avram Avinu. What is the matbeya of Avram Avinu? Zaken Uzekinu Mitzad Echad, has an old man and old woman on one side, Ubachar Ubetzula Mitzad Acher. That really wraps up the previous Gemara discussing the coins. And from there we segue, Ba'yimine Rava me Rav Chisda. Rava asked Rav Chisda the following, Shayla Malbes Chaveiroi Ala Matbeya. This is the inverse of the previous discussion. Someone lends his friend money on a coin, V'hoyisifu alav, and the coin appreciates in value. Meaning, the government made it worth more. Mahu was dalach. Amrlai neislo matbeya. Hayoitse b'isei shah. You're allowed to pay the currency now, meaning a lower level, as now this coin is worth more. Amrlai va'afilu kinafya. You can even, when the new coin is as large as a sieve, afilu kinafya. Says the Gemara, Amrlein, Amrlei afilu ki sartaya, even a tartaya, Amrlein. Ask the Gemara, because they lean on peri. So now we're sort of getting to the crux of what happened over here. And this is, inflation 101. If we look at Rashi, Rashi gives us a little bit of a background. The Sifa and Alav Mahu. The government added to the coin, Aliba Diraf. We're in Rashi, 4 lines to the end of the Amid, to Amar Naisla Matbel Shal Isei Shah. So says the Gemara, you pay b'shas birayin. Now the Gemara says, okay, but you're going to have to pay bigger and bigger. Says the Gemara, yes, you have to pay at the time of the birayin. Ask the Gemara, because Zailinon payrois, but the payrois are cheaper. Legabi matbeya azu nimsa sham b'shtaker zebetei seves ve'ino dem l'rishayin v'avi ribis. Says the Gemara, you're going to end up paying more, because the produce value has fallen as the increase in the coin value. So if you pay the current value, you're going to be paying more. Amar Ravashi, so says Ravashi, Chazinan, we view, what is the reason? If the reason why the payers are cheaper is because the government added to the coin, it was a direct correlation that it happened, then it's true. Then we reduce it, cause that would be ribis. But as we turn over to Sadi Chesam and Aleph, says the Gemara, but if it wasn't directly, but rather it's just due to the fluctuation in market prices, as Rashi says, it wasn't specifically because the new value of the coin, but rather it was because there was excess payrois, that we don't reduce him from the payment. Says Gemara, 1 second, but he's getting lemaisa more. Answers the Gemara, Elok Yadar Papa Ravuna Breder of Yeshua Avdi Ovda Bezuzi Dagardmis Taya Ad Asara Betamna. That you had to adjust it based on the Zuzim of our Gadmin, the Arab, until the ratio of Asara B'Tanya 10 to 8, meaning that we're going to Lamaisa adjust it in order to make it equal each other out. Says Rashi, Avude Avda Ba'adam Shehilves Chaveira. What's going on over here is, when someone lent his friend money, Al Matveva Siva V'Achleis Agurdim Iseicher Yishmael, a certain known Arab merchant, and he had the original coin before. Again, the government added on to the coin, but he had the original. 8 of the new ones were Yud Min HaRishayim V'Nasla Shemena, and therefore we allowed him to give Shemena. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba. Now we're about to have really the convergence of Perek HaGoizel with Perek HaChoivel, the coins with damages. Says Rabba, Azarik Matvir Shachavir Liyam HaGadol Pot. If you threw your friend's coins into the Yam HaGadol, you're potter. Says Gemara, my time, what's the reason? 6 lines down. Amar, hi manach kamach, because he says, what is in front of you? Ibayis shakli. If you want, take it. Says the Gemara, meaning the person could say, I didn't damage you. The coin's sitting in the ocean. Go take it. What's the problem? But says the Gemara is only into clear water. You see the coin. Yeah, you want your coin? It's go there. Go get it. Swim out and get it. If the water is dirty, then then it doesn't work. And furthermore, says the Gemara, where he knocked the coin into the ocean. But if Lamaisa, he took it in his hand, that's called that he has stolen, and therefore Hashava Ba'i Lemevit. So I said that the two parakim converge, because we're seeing a damages of a coin. So we have our coins, and we have damages and Gizela. We're trying to figure out how do we deal with such a conversion. So the Gemara says, he in reality, theoretically, is allowed to say, oh, go take your coin, it's in front of you. But explains the Gemara, in practicality, it's not so simple. It's only if, number one, you could see the coin, and number two, he only knocked it into the water. Because if he actually took it in his hand, then the moment that it was in his hand, that moment was a moment of Gezela. Says the Gemara, Masiv Rava. That was the statement of Rabbah, the din of Rabbah. So asks Rav, Ein mechalin al ma'i she'enai b'rshusai. Says in a braysa, we're not allowed to be mechalel ma'is meiser she'eni onto coins that are not in your possession. Ketzad hayaloi ma'is b'kistarya ay b'har hamelech. If someone had coins in Kistarya and Har Hamelech, it should not fall kisoy le'yam, and that's the case, of course, where I seen from my gadol. Ein mechalin. So what do we see in this braysa? We see that coins in the Yam HaGadol is not considered in your possession. Ein mechalin on it. Amar Rabba, shiny linyan meiser to be in matzoi biyadcha. Meiser is a different din, because meiser has to be matzoi, found in your hands. The Rachmana Amar steht in the Torah, v'sarta akeseh biyadcha v'leka. And it's not, but in a chanami, it's not a kasha on the din of Rava that allows one to say, Arisha chalafanecha, go take your coin from the ocean. V'amar Rabba, and further Rabba continues. Hashaf matbea shel chaveiroi, so it damages, smooths out the coin of his friend, potter, you don't have to pay him. My time, you didn't do anything, meaning the coin is still here. The coin is a representation, so you ruin the representation, but bad Sam, the coin is still here. Says the Gemara, v'hanimi de macharya, where he beat it with a hammer, he made it smooth and stone. But if he filed it down, then of course he is chayav. Why? Says the Gemara, because chasure chasre. Because if you filed it down, then lamaisa you did cause him to lose. Because now the coin is lacking, and of course this goes back to a nostalgic world in which there was actually an intrinsic value to the coin, and therefore if you shave it down, you're losing that intrinsic value as it's not the full weight that it was. Masiv Rava asks, Rava call ein of v'samay. If someone hits an eved on his eye and he blinds him, Allah's in his ear, v'charshan he deafens him, eved yatzah necheros. But kineged ein v'yara. If you sit opposite his eye, now he can't see. Kineged also opposite his ear, v'eino shemeya. Ein eved yatzah necheros. Then he can't go to freedom. So ask the Gemara, that's making something not work is the same thing as damaging the idol entirely. So says the Gemara, when you hammer the coin, even though it's true, in weight it's still here, but it's as if you damaged him. It's no longer functioning, so you should have to pay him back. Answers the Gemara, Rabba l'tamei dam Rabba, Charsha la'aviv nerag. someone makes his father deaf, he's executed. Rava holds that charisha, deafening, always has some element of actual minimization. Tafse the dama naflasle, a little bit of blood falls into the ear, and that's why you're obligated. But in our case, where you properly just efface the coin by smoothing it out, you would not be chayiv. Avama Rabba continues Rabba. If someone nicks the ear, cuts off the ear of his friend, is referring to the animal, therefore makes it have a mum. It's not able to be brought as a carbon potter. My time of parak the kaima. The cow is still here as it was. You didn't do anything. Meaning, if this wasn't a carbon animal, if this was a regular animal, no one would even care. Who cares? A little nick on the ear. Because this animal's a carbon, therefore you can't bring it as a carbon. But it's not called that you damage him, and therefore you don't have to pay anything. Masiv Rava, 10 lines to the bottom. First word online is Masiv asks Rav, someone did malacha, someone did work with the waters of the paraduma, or with the actual paraduma itself. The halacha is that it passes it from being a paraduma. Says the Gemara, says the Gemara, it's possible in Adam, but you're chayiv v'dinei shvayim. Why? Malacha udloi minkar hezeka. Malacha udloi minkar hezeka. The reason is, again, one more time. Melacha, you did work. Deloi minkar hezeka. The damages is not recognizable. Avol tzayrim de minkar hezeka chanami de mechayiv b'dinei Adam. Says the Gemara, but in the case of Sairim Aizen, where the damage is recognizable, albeit very small, but Lamaisa, there is a nick there that you could see. So says the Gemara, in that case it will be different, and therefore you should be chayiv. So why are you telling me that in such a scenario, Rabbi, why are you teaching you would be potter? Answers the Gemara, Amri Odin Dafilu Tzayrim Potter. The chiddush is the other way. The chiddush is that there's a chiyuv v'dinei shamayim, even though it's not minkar, but you can't bring the raya the other way. V'amar Rabba, 2 lines to the bottom of Seirif, shtaraya shel chavero, you burn up the document, the paper of your friend, potter. You're potter. Why? Because you said it's burnt paper. If I take your piece of paper and I burn it, what I do is worth nothing. So now if I take a document that has words on it, call the shtar, call the document, all of a sudden now I'm going to be chayiv. Again, said Rabbi, you'll be potter. Ask Rabbi Merachama, what exactly is the case? If there were witnesses that know what was written in the document, so those witnesses could just rewrite the document. How do we know what's written in it? Talking about a case where he believes him, but now you no longer have the shtar, nor do you have the edim. So that's going to be the unique chiddush in our case. Continues the Gemara. After all these lengthy statements of Rabbah, says the Gemara in the 4th line of Sadi Chesed Beis, Amar Avdi Bar Chanina Hadir Rabbah Machlekes of Shimon and Rabbani. These dinim of Rabbah, these dinim of damages which aren't really damages. For example, the previous case that we just said, you burnt up the document of your friend, and you're telling me you're a potter, because what did you do already? It's a mere piece of paper. Says the Gemara, this is in reality a machlokes, Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan. The Rav Shimon, the Amar, 2 lines on the white lines. Davar hagoyrim l'mamun kimamun damim machlokes that we've had is something that causes a gram. So that causes money. Does that get the status of money or not? According to Rav Shimon, that it does. Therefore, mechayiv. So suggest the Gemara, this should be the good old-fashioned machlokes, Rav Shimon and the Rabbanon. Maskif la Ravuna Bredi Rav Yeshua. Aimer the Shams of the Rav Shimon Davar Gemam Dami. When does Rav Shimon say that? Didn't be davar she'ikaroi mamain, something that beikar inherently is money. Kiderabba, like Rabba, Damar Rabba, Gazel Chametz Lefnei Pesach. If you saw Chametz for Pesach or Ba'achar, B'sarfo, someone else comes and burns it b'mayit on Pesach. Potter, why? Shakomatum Lav Levaroi. Because everyone is mechuyev to rid themselves of such chametz. Palachar Pesach. If he burnt it after Pesach, machlekes of Shimon Rabban. The Rav Shimon never go to the dami chayiv. The Rabban never go to the dami potter. But bedavar she'eni karay mamoin mi amrinan. Was there ever a machlekes of Shimon and the Chachamim on something which be'ikr is not money, which is our case, which is a document? How are you equating our case of Rabbah as a document that you ripped and burnt? You just caused him the representation to be lost. How is that the same achlaik as Rav Shimon and the Rabbanan? Continues the Gemara, answers the Gemara. Amar Amemar, man de doin dina de garbi, magbe de beishar malia. Says Amemar, those who dan dina de garmi, garmi being a higher level of grama, more direct, would yes allow you to collect the value of the full document. Lon dan dina de garmi, magbe de me nara ba'alma. You won't be able to collect the value of the paper. So Gemara is really folding that this is not the machlekes of Shimon and the Rabbanan. Havi avda v'kavi rav l'ravashi v'agubei ki kishura letzalma, and he allowed him to collect like a beam used for images, meaning he allowed him to collect from a high level item. Continues the Gemara at the two dots, about 12 lines into the wide lines on Sadiches Amid base, quoting the next line in the Mishnah, auspicious as we begin Adar Rishon to bring in Emirtz Hashem the dinim of Chametz. Says the Gemara Mantana. Who is the Tana that says that by something that is also Chametz Shavuot Pesach you're allowed to say Harei Shechal Lefanecha Amar Rav Chisda? You know the Tana is Rabbi Yaakov. He did Tanya Shar Shehim is actually Nigmar Dinoi. If a shar that killed a person, if before it was a Gemar Din Machayrai Macher, if the owner sells it, it's sold. Hekteishai Muktash Shachatai Bisarai Mutter Hechziru Shaimer Labaila Muchzar. You let her return it. But Misha Nigmar Dinoi, once it's Gepaskin that this shar has to be killed, Skila Einoi Macher Tishoina Muktash Shachatai Bisarai Asar Hechziru Shaimer Labailov. Einoi Muchzar. That is the Tanakam upon Rabbi Yaakov Aimer. The opinion that we're looking for says Rabbi Yaakov Av Mishanigmar Dinoi Hechziru Shaimer Labailo Muchzar. So what is this machlokes between Rabbi Yaakov and the Chachamim? I love Akamil Yaakov Savar Oimrin Bi'isuri Hana Arisha Chalafanecha Rabbanan Tavin Arisha Arisha Chalafanecha. So suggests the Gemara the machlokes that we're in the middle of discussing is the machlokes of Yaakov and the Chachamim. Amar li Rabba loy tekuli Amar Rina B'Yisrael Nevish Chol Vanech Tim Kei Nivglu B'Chametz V'Vesach. I'll tell you a simple raya. Because if they were arguing about the Surei Hana, they should have argued about the original case, the case of Chametz V'Vesach. So rather, what's the machlokes of Yaakov? Elo Amar Rabba Hacha B'Goyim Dino Shel Shar Shalei B'Vanav Kamifliki. A sidebar machlokes like we've had in the beginning of the parak of Yaakov and Rabbanan arguing. Can you dan up the case of the shar not in front of it? Rabban and Savri, ein gaimer dinu shel shel b'fanav damar le yasitu nialei havi markinu le lagma. Because he would say, if you would have brought it in front of me, you know what I would do to it? I would take it to a swamp, and Bezin wouldn't be able to dan on it. Hashta misarta biad manzlo metzina l'shtayuye tina bada. No, by Bezin dealing with this case, you're giving it over to one who I can't get it back. So owner has a taina b'hadei. For Rav Yaakov saver garmi dina shel shel b'fanav damar lei my avdelei seif avigamar lei dina shel b'fanav. Either way, they kabaskin shel b'fanav, and therefore it makes no difference. Relates the Gemara. A story, Ashkechei, Rav Chisda, le Rabba bar Shmuel. Rav Chisda found Rabbi Bar Shmuel Amar le Tanita, Midi B'Yisura. He said, teach me something about Isser Hanam or Lei. So Rabbi Shmuel responded, and of course I taught you, Tanina. Hey, Sheves Zela says that you should return the stolen item, Matam Eloi Marasher Gazel. Once the Torah taught us to return the stolen item, what if they that you stole? It's repetitive. Yachzer ke'ein shegasal. Says Gemara, you know we learn from here, if to return it in the same way like it was stolen. Mikan amru gazal matzmeya v'nifsal peiros v'erkivu yayin v'hechmet shuma v'nitmeis chamaz over the Pesach v'heim avnevdu b'ya aveira. In all of these cases, Vishar ad shlo nigmar dinay oimer loy harei shel chalav. You can just give it back in all these cases, even though now it's rotten wine, now it's tamei truma, now it's a coin that no longer has any value, the fruit are rotten, etc. You're allowed to return it. Who is the one that says you can only do this before the Gemara? Din Rabbanan. Vikatani, and one of the cases was Chametz Avla Pesach, so we see even in the case of Chametz, you can say Arei Lifa Necha. So clearly we see that the Rabbanan are maskim in such a case. Amarlei mashkachas la lotema lahu v'loi midi. If you meet the Talmid in the Shiva, don't say anything to them. Don't tell them about this price. Rav Chisda says to Rabbi Shmuel. Why? Because they'll realize that they have a kasha on what he holds. And we conclude one little piece of Gemara before the Mishnah. Peres v'kiva Amarlei rishachol v'necha. Ay v'atanan peres v'kiva mishalim kishas ha'gzela. The price is referring to you can return it. It's only when it's partially rotten. When it's fully rotten, then you are not able. And we just begin the new Mishnah towards the bottom of Sadiches Amid Beis. Nasan lo umnin le'takin. If you give an item to an uman, to a craftsman to fix it, and guess what? He ruined it. Chayavin l'shalem, the craftsman has to pay. Nasan l'cheiresh shida teva meidel, you gave to a cheiresh, you gave to a, incorrect. Newsly didn't make sense. You give to a charash, that's a carpenter. Shida teva migdal, a box, or another item to fix the takev kukla, and he ruined it. Chayav l'shalem. V'habanai, or you gave an item to a builder to do what? To keep a lot of listers like Kaisel, and you told him to demolish a wall, v'shibur avanim, oy she'ezikon, and he broke the stones or he damaged them. Chayav l'shalem. Hayasaiser mitzad zev and aful mitzad acher, then potter v'machzamaka chayiv. But if it's due to his blow, then he's chayiv. So the Mishnah's theme is all the cases that you give it to someone to fix, and unfortunately they didn't fix it, but rather they did the opposite. They caused more damage. We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up in the Gemara the next year. B'siyata dishmaya.